In this video, I'm going to talk about Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication in the context of co-parenting after separation. Stay tuned. Welcome to Wellness with John. I'm John Peters. This video is a part of a series on co-parenting issues dealing with being parents after separation. And if you want to go watch the complete series, I'll put a link up here somewhere. You can go back and start with the Start Here video. I'll also put that one in the description below so you can get to it, and I'll put a link for that one at the end. But I'm here because I've been working with separated parents for over 30 years as a therapist, as a co-parent coach, as an educator teaching the Cope with Divorce class to several thousand parents. I've written a couple books on the topic and used to do mediation, and I've been an expert witness in divorce hearings in court. So this video is one related to communication, but I'm not going to talk about communication in general. But I will say that there's a particular resource that I both dislike and I like. I dislike it in some ways, and I'll explain what those are, but I like it a lot in some other ways. And so I'll tell you why you should consider reading this particular book if your goal is to get better at communicating with your ex, but also if your goal is to just be a better communicator with everybody, including coworkers, your partner, family members, other people like that. So I want to talk about Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, and then stay to the end, because at the end of the video, I'm going to give you two bonus books that I think are also really helpful if you're going to be dealing with challenging negotiations with your ex, okay? But I'll tell you about those at the end. So Marshall Rosenberg is this dude who was involved in the civil rights movement even before it was called the civil rights movement. So at the very early part of the 60s, he was someone who was very interested in conflict resolution and peace studies and communication, and he ended up getting a doctorate, I think, in a related field. And he did a lot of activism and a lot of teaching, and he developed this system that ended up being called nonviolent communication, or NVC for short, and I'll just call it NVC for the rest of this video. So let me first tell you what I don't like about the book, and let's just get that out of the way because it might be a stumbling block for you as well. Marshall Rosenberg developed this system, which I'm going to explain, and then he wrote this book. And like a lot of people who write books, me included, he skipped hiring an editor. And so, in my opinion, he could have written a better book from a writing standpoint, but it's short and it's to the point. So if you want an easy read that doesn't take a lot of time and is just to the point on what he wants to get across, it's a decent book. The other complaint about NVC is that some people find it a little too rosy, and I'll explain how I modify it so that that isn't an issue. And it's also true that when it became popular, especially in like the 90s into the 2000s, there were lots of super enthusiastic people who kind of took the ball and ran with it and ended up looking a little silly. Now, are they silly? Not really. Did they come across as a little silly? Yeah. So if you go look at NVC videos on YouTube, the reality is you're going to find some people who look a little silly in how they're teaching it, but that's okay. We can just ignore the silly factor because Rosenberg actually has some really, really helpful things in the book. And I'm going to talk about a few of them here. I'm not going to try to give you a whole primer micro class on NVC here, but I want to tell you why I think Rosenberg's ideas are very useful. Okay. So part of what Rosenberg says in the book is that there's a certain syntax or a way we put the elements of communication together in order to be effective, right? If you want to get your point across, you want to ask the right questions so you get answers, you want to negotiate with someone so you have a mutually satisfying outcome. Rosenberg thinks that there are better ways to do that and there are less good ways to do that. And the prototypical Rosenberg kind of syntax goes like this. When I see you pack our son's lunch for him when he has to go to school, I feel happy about that because I think he needs to have a lunch at school, and the strategy of sending his lunch to school with him is related to our universal need of physical health. Okay, now that sounds a little cumbersome, but basically Rosenberg says, excuse me, Rosenberg says, we observe something. When we observe something, we tend to think things about it. We tend to feel things in relation to what we think about those things. The reason that we think the things we think have to do with our attitudes and our feelings related to whether the thing we're seeing and observing, it seems to be strategies that are related to somebody getting their needs met, either me, you, or our kid. Okay. Rosenberg also says most communication is implicitly or explicitly a request. Basically, I want you to cooperate with my ideas of my strategies to get my needs met or our kids' needs met. And so there are needs, and then there are strategies to get the needs met. Okay. And if we're negotiating about something, it means I want you to cooperate with my idea of good strategies so that I get my needs met and maybe you do too. Okay. So here are a few points that I think Rosenberg makes in the book that are very useful. Number one, that there's a difference between thoughts and feelings, and to be emotionally competent inside yourself and to incorporate emotions into how we communicate with others, we need to be able to clearly identify and communicate our emotions. And if I say something like, I feel like Joe is not going to follow through with the agreement, that's not an emotion. If you say, I feel like, I feel that, I feel he, I feel she, I feel it, you're really talking about thoughts. And it's not that thoughts are bad. We just need to differentiate thoughts from feelings. So I think Joe is not going to follow through with the agreement. What do I feel about that? I feel a little frustrated in anticipation that that outcome might happen. Okay. The feeling is the frustration. The thought is, I think he's not going to follow through with it. You will be a better person in terms of your own emotional maturity even if you don't change what you say to other people, if internally in your own head you separate thoughts from feelings, because we need to actually feel feelings in order to be emotionally competent, and we need to be able to parse those out as separate things from what we're thinking about something. So I feel angry when I think that I'm going to lose money in the stock market or whatever, okay? So thoughts versus feelings. That's one of Rosenberg's points, and he makes it better than I do in the book. So go read the book if you want more instruction on that. And number two, Rosenberg talks about the difference between strategies and needs. If I say to my friend, let's go for a walk, that's a strategy. It's something I will do, it's something they will do, it's something we will do, okay? What is the need? The need is connection, okay? We could have connection with a different strategy, okay? But if my friend says, I don't want to go for a walk, and I don't differentiate strategies from needs, what I hear that as, I don't care about your need for connection, which is a bigger affront than I don't want to take a walk, okay? So when we clarify the difference between our strategies, the things we do or the things we try to get other people to do to get our needs met, when we clarify that difference, we become much more flexible and effective at getting our needs met, because strategies are always flexible, needs are non-negotiable. I have needs and you have needs. Rosenberg argues that there are universal human needs that we just all have. We all need play. We all need meaning. We all need integrity. We all need physical safety. You know, these are things you have and I have, everybody has. It's not controversial, but we use all kinds of different strategies to get our needs met, okay? People sometimes put strategies and needs together in a way that they argue too much. And I'll give you an example of that. I was talking with a set of separated parents one time. The mom was mad at the dad because the dad would always make the kid put his jacket on in cold weather before he went to school. The dad was mad at the mom because she would never make him put his jacket on. She would let him go out and just be cold, okay? Both were accusing each other as not being fit parents. But when I asked the dad, why are you mad at her about that? And he said, well, he needs to be physically safe and not sick, okay? A universal human need, right? And his strategy was make sure he has his coat on before he goes to school. when I asked the mom, why are you mad at him for barking at him and nagging him to put on the coat? She said, well, our son's going to be 18 soon. I want him to have integrity and maturity and to be able to take care of himself. And when we make him put his jacket on, he doesn't learn through natural consequences how to behave better, right? So they were both in agreement about the fundamental needs. They both wanted the kid to be mature and well-developed. They both wanted the kid to not get sick, okay? Their strategies were what they were arguing about, right? But when the mom saw the dad nag the boy about the jacket and the dad saw the mom not make him put the jacket on, they went to the place of that other parent doesn't care about our kid's fundamental needs. Therefore, they're an unfit parent, right? So sometimes we need to parse out what are the strategies that I'm using to get my needs met or that I'm trying to convince other people to do so that I or others get needs met versus what are the needs that are alive in that moment when I'm doing that negotiation or that request, okay? I know that's a little bit complicated, but it makes sense once you start really thinking about it. Like, do I really need to go to McDonald's? No, I need to eat. Going to McDonald's is just a strategy to eating, right? And if you get more in that mode of separating strategies and needs, you become a more flexible negotiator with your ex in terms of getting mutually satisfying solutions for parenting and co-parenting after your separation, okay? Another thing, and I mentioned this already, but I'll come back to it, is Rosenberg says that pretty much everything we do is some sort of request, either directly or implicitly, to try to get the people around us to collude with the strategies to get our needs met. Okay, that's like he argues that pretty much all communication is like that. So what he thinks is the best requests are ones that are explicit, clear, and doable. So unfortunately, we fail at getting our needs met. We fail at getting other people to collude with our strategies because we don't deliver a clear, doable request. So an example of that would be if I say to you, I want you to respect me. What the heck does that mean? I may have some idea about what it means. I may have some vague intuition about how I feel when I'm respected. But Rosenberg would say that's just not clear enough. How would a neutral third party observe our interaction and tell whether respect happened or not? But if I say something like, please don't interrupt me when I'm speaking, that's clear and doable. You will unambiguously understand what I'm talking about. And a third party who's a neutral observer would also understand what's being talked about, right? So clear, doable requests are more likely to get a good outcome than vague requests like respect me or let me be me or, stop bothering me, so clear and doable. Now, back to emotions. One thing that I differ from Rosenberg on related to emotions is Rosenberg is a stickler basically for being very clear and explicit about emotions. And so basically, anytime you're aware of your emotion, he thinks it's a good thing to share. And it is true that both challenging and positive emotions can be instrumental in shaping relationships and shaping behaviors. However, in the context of separated parenting, and I say this in other videos as well, you'll hear me keep saying it, it is my opinion that separated parents need to lower the amount of emotional content in their communications and interactions quite a bit compared with what was going on when you were partnered, and also what was going on during like the hostile battling or hurt phase during or after the separation. So I don't think it's good to steer into that emotional expression until you and your co-parent years from now have a stable, settled, friendly relationship. Maybe you're not true friends, but you're friendly and there's some appropriate emotion. But I think, and if you look at how the Reply Calm app, if you use my app, and for those of you who are watching this don't know what I'm talking about, I'll explain in a second. I built the app in part to reduce that emotional content of the communications because it's one of the ways that separated parents get derailed in their communications a lot, right? So less is better in general. Now, about the ReplyCom app, if you got to this video inside the app, you know what I'm talking about already. If you're watching this video on YouTube and you haven't heard of my app, be aware that I created an app that is trained on my 30 years of experience of working with separated parents, and it's called Reply Calm. And it's an app that you can use where you can actually paste in messages from your ex or messages you're writing to your ex, and it will review that and give you multiple options of good ways to edit that to communicate so that you are more civil and collaborative and more likely to get the outcomes that you want and less likely to get derailed into hostility. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link below this video if you want to go get that app. All right. So in short, is Nonviolent Communication a good book to get? Yes. And I'll put a link below the video if you want to just jump over on Amazon and get it. By the way, any links that I put in videos are often affiliate links. They don't cost you any more, but it's one way to support my channel because I get a really small commission for those referred links. But in any case, there's a link below this video to the Amazon listing for the Nonviolent Communication book. Feel free to check it out. 2 other books you should consider reading if you want to be a good negotiator, especially with your ex, is Getting to Yes and Getting Past No. And these books are written for mediators, but they're written in lay language, so you don't have to be a mediator. They're not full of jargon that's dense and difficult to understand. But those books really teach you some extremely valuable things that will make you a much more effective negotiator with your ex. And I'll give you an example of one of the most valuable in those books. They talk about differentiating positions versus interests, right? So position is a goal or something you're advocating for. Like, I want to go to McDonald's. No, I want to go to Burger King. Well, going to McDonald's is a position that we're holding. Going to Burger King is a position that we're holding. Well, what's your interest in going to McDonald's? Well, my interest is I like Big Macs and I want a Big Mac, right? What's your interest in going to Burger King? I want a Whopper, right? Sometimes we have mutually exclusive interests, like that example where Big Mac versus Whopper, and we just have to figure out how to compromise or settle it in some way with leverage. But sometimes, like in the instance that I talked about earlier with the 2 parents fighting over whether to make the boy put his coat on, their interests were actually ones that they could get behind. They were both interested in him being healthy. They were interested in him being well-developed and mature, okay? What they were arguing over was positions. Make him put his coat on, don't make him put his coat on. When we think about positions versus your interest in a position, you often get more flexible. And I often see this when I'm working with parents who are arguing over the parenting time schedule, and parent A says it should be this schedule, parent B says no, it should be that schedule. But usually when I interrogate them and say, person A, what's your interest in that schedule? Why do you like it? And there are lots of different reasons to like one schedule over another. Like, it works with my work schedule better. I think it's better for Johnny's sleep. It's better for school nights, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Once you start talking about interests, you're much more likely to be able to negotiate a mutually satisfying agreement that will be stable and lasting, right? So anyway, that's just one tip that you'll get from those 2 books. I'll put links to those 2 books below this video as well if you want to check them out. But Getting to Yes and Getting Past No, both really well worth reading in your situation if you're going to be dealing with lots of negotiations with your ex. All right. So thanks for joining me in this video today. And there will be a link that'll pop up on the screen somewhere here that'll be to the first video in this playlist. If you want to watch all of my co-parenting videos that I've put in the playlist, you can use that to jump there. And check the links below this video for the app and also the 3 books that I talked about. See you in the next video.